a great day, not because it's Thursday or Friday, I don't know what day it is. But we're gonna make a how-to video today, which is a little bit different because usually car cobbler is just about ideas and, you know, rambling along, building stuff. But there's a couple things that I want to cover that'd be very helpful with these old Chevy bodies. But the first one, what we're gonna do is how to replace a rusty door panel. And this is a bunch of options we'll go over and then choose one and then we'll do it and we'll see how it turns out. Well, I've been really looking forward to this project because I'm actually going to be able to do a how-to video because we're going to be fixing this door, but the procedure could apply to any rusty panel that you need to replace on your car. And this door is a little bit beat up. It's got some rumpled parts in it. But the big issue is that the bottom of it is rusted. You know, I mean, where do you stop? You'd actually have to replace this whole thing. When you get down here, there's nothing left. Yeah, that's a major setback. We're going to be spending a couple more days just on this door. So not only the door skin, but the actual bottom of the door, the frame of the door, is full of rust holes as well. Now, the deal is to replace the panel, we're going to replace just the flat square part first, and then we'll do the corners after. For two reasons. One reason is the corners are hard to build, especially when you get into the frame part, because there's so many bends and curves in there. But the other reason is that you want to leave those where they are for now as a reference point, and we'll patch this straight part, the easy part first, both the bottom of the frame and the outside panel of the door. And then when we have that reference to the corners, right, it'll be exactly the same as the old one because it'll just reference to these corners. Then you can actually take the corners out and rebuild those in reference to the new part that you've put in. So you don't want to just cut the whole thing off and then not know where you are. So the good thing about this door and most doors, there's a curve going like this way around the door, but there's no curve going this way. This is a straight, flat piece. Let me get a ruler. Theoretically, it's a straight, flat piece. You can tell it's supposed to be. It's got a little bump here, it's got a little bump here, but otherwise, originally it was flat this way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have to put a seam right across here. The challenging part of putting a seam is that you don't want to warp the door because it's hard to straighten after it's warped, but also really hard to straighten because it's inside the frame. You can't get at the back of it. So we've got options on the way that we'll do this. Option number one, butt joint. If you were going to do a butt joint, you would clamp that in place or tack it in place even. As you cut, even if you go a little bit crooked, they'll both be crooked the same and it'll match up, right? And then the other thing that you want to do is you've got to make sure that it's flat against this, and then you cut it on an angle, a 45-degree angle, whatever way is easier. When you take the old piece out from underneath, the new piece and the old piece, because it's on a 45-degree angle, they'll actually mesh. So the edges of the steel look like this, and you've cut it with a zip disc in here. So now when you put these together, you see how this one comes down, right? This one would come down on top of that one and meet up without any gap. And then you begin to weld. And of course you weld it, you know, an inch and a half apart, just a little bzz, bzz. You got to keep it cool. No matter how we're welding it, we're going to weld it just a little bit at a time and then come back and put another dot beside the other dot, making sure all the time that the metal is cool enough that you can put your hand on there without burning yourself. And we'll use a wet rag or compressed air to cool that off. So that's number one, the butt weld. Okay, now the second way to do it would be a lap weld, where the one piece of steel, in this case the door, this door skin comes down like this, and then you would make a little kind of a place to put your new piece of steel on top of it, okay? So then you've got a lap, overlap. Okay, so basically this tool goes into the air hammer. So you go along the edge of your steel and you've got this little shape there. Okay, so that air hammer bangs this thing like this, and you put that on and you end up with a flush. Okay, outside of the door, weld it right along here. Another way that you can do it, on the door, you have it cut and then you bend it in like this. Okay, and then your new piece of steel, you have a same sort of thing where they come together like that. And then you weld it right here. Now the advantages to this is it gives you like a bone, like a backbone, like a frame, right? Because it's not just flat steel. The issue with these ones is that it's really easy for it to just, you know, bend any way it wants to because there's nothing to hold it. This is a little bit better, the lap joint. But this one here, we can give it actually some strength, some backbone, so that when you bend those both in there and you carefully weld those, again, not to get too hot, that'll actually provide, you know, like a reinforcement all the way down the door to keep it straight. And then all you do is you fill this with body filler, and you've got a great joint. All right, so which one shall we do? The next thing let's take a look at is the inside of the door, right? The frame part of the door. This part here is going to be a bit more of a challenge, obviously, because it has so many curves and stuff in it. This bracket here is what holds the upholstery on. It's got a clip that slides down in here and that holds it on from coming out. I'm going to eliminate that because I'm probably not going to use that system. It's complicated and you got to have a lot of different parts made, but I find that I can just put some upholstered buttons on there and it works perfectly well. And nobody says, hey, that's ugly. They actually look pretty good. And then this part here is a kind of a clip thing similar that holds the rubber seal on here at the bottom of the door that closes against the rocker panel. Because my rocker panel is a different shape, I'm not going to try to reproduce that. Even if it wasn't, even with original rocker panels, I would not try to reproduce this. Not that it's that difficult, but I think it's pointless because we're just going to glue the weather stripping on everywhere else anyway, you know. But back in the day, they probably didn't have good glue, but we got good glue now. Okay, so the panel now that we're talking about, that we make to go over, you know, to replace the rusted part, actually comes in and it bends over, folds over on top of the bottom frame. Okay, all doors seem to be like that, any of the old ones anyway. It's folded, the whole outside skin comes against the frame and it's folded over, and that's what holds it together. We have to figure out how far up this rust comes. I mean, obviously huge holes in here, but behind here, there'll probably be, yep, fair amount of rust behind there as well. So we've got to cut it open and see. Okay, so there's enough rust in here that we're going to have to cut into the interior door skin up a little bit to get past that rust. All right, let's get back over to the other side again. Let's just put a square on here for now. Not that it's that big of a deal, but again, it's just easier to do it straight and square. So replacing a strip along the bottom, question is, how high up are you going to replace it? And the answer is as high up as it takes to get rid of all the rust and the blemishes. Now, the actual rust probably only comes up about 4.5 inches, something like that. But in the middle, there's an old bashed in part here, and that was filled, and it's all pitted with surface rust. And that comes up 8 inches. So we can do it at 8 inches, and then for sure we've cut everything, all of the garbage out. Now, because we're going to use the V method of joining, we're not going to have two pieces overlapped where we can cut it and it'll end up exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put a straight edge along here and cut to that so that I have a more accurate. One thing you don't want to be doing is filling gaps, right? Especially in this 20 gauge stuff. It's just too much work. Okay, perfectly straight edge. All we got to do is cut it. And not only do we have rust, we have sand. That's the thing about sandblasting. Everything I work on has sand falling out of it, no matter how much you clean. So we'll bend it in. Let's do it at the 3/8 inch mark. Okay, so that's our guide for bending this into the V shape. And we'll just go along it with a hammer. Because this door, like I say, has been pretty bashed up, but that's going to be okay, because the new piece is not bashed up. We'll fold it in there and it will give us a good reference for a straight line. So we have cut this piece to the bottom frame, inch up, 2 inches over, 1.5 inches, leaving a little extra because we're going to do a butt weld on the inside skin of the door, with the zip disc thing that we talked about. So I'm going to eliminate this little hump in here, no need. So it's going to come up an inch, come over 2 inches, and then up. So I've bent it up an inch already, and then I've got to go over 2 inches. And you know what? It's just about lunchtime. Actually, it's 2 o'clock. But this morning we had a memorial for a young leader, a very good friend, who died in India, an Indian guy, and at Team Leadership College International. Many of you know that place. And Joel Gaddam was a very well loved and respected young guy. So the memorial service was on Zoom, right? Because we're all over the world. And there was like almost 400 people connected. And a lot of them were like groups of people or families of people. So there's probably at least 1,000 people involved there. And it went on for over 3 hours. Because, you know, people need to be able to say something. And to this guy who was an amazing influence on so many lives. So it's a bit of a heavy heart today, you know. You know, it is what it is. He was 31 years old. And nobody should die when they're 31 years old, especially in this day and age. But, you know, it really didn't have, well, I shouldn't say lack of medical. I mean, they spent a lot of money trying to get this guy to, you know, to be alive. But he's been in a wheelchair since he was, or invalid since he was 10 years old. So, but yet a very influential guy. It's amazing. It's one of those stories where, you know, somebody with a tremendous handicap doesn't even allow their handicap to be seen so much. And that's what a lot of people commented. You didn't realize he was in a wheelchair because the guy was so positive and so encouraging. And he just built up other people so amazingly. And you know what's neat? I mean, I did the little message for the memorial. And what's really neat is when you get to tell the truth. You know, the proverbial funeral where, you know, some rotten, no good for nothing guy that nobody wanted to be around, and you got to say nice things about him. But it's so nice to do a memorial where the guy, you know, it doesn't matter what good thing you say about him, it was all true. And more than that, it was impactful. And so, yeah, a lot of people, but yeah, it's quite a thing. It's been quite an ordeal for the family there in India. Of course, it is for anybody, but, you know, grief is a tough thing to deal with. It happens to all of us. We need to deal with it. And some of us, it seems, get more practice than others, right? And you kind of wonder, you know, like, here some of us are in our, well, I don't know, old age. I still feel pretty young on the inside. But, you know, some of us seem to be blessed with long life. And it has nothing to do with what we deserve. You know, I mean, young Joel in India, if you want to talk about deserving, there's a guy that deserved to live, you know. And so obviously that's not what it's about. Now we'll take the cut side. That's this side. This is actually the end of a new sheet, which gives you a perfectly straight line, which is going to go into the V and make the weld. Just helps to have that really straight. Now this one here, I mean, seriously, I did a nice job cutting it, I'll tell you. It's pretty hard to find any flaws in that. But anyway, this one is perfect. So this is where I'm going to put the little V-bend in here. And then we'll put the fold on this side to go around the door part. All right, do you remember how much material we put into that V on the door panel? It was 3/8 of an inch. Well, you try to be accurate. It's a good thing we have rulers and set squares and measuring tapes and Sharpies and all of those kind of things to make accuracy possible. But the other thing that makes accuracy possible is focus and attention. Now this is 20 gauge, so it should bend pretty easy. And we'll see what it looks like compared to the other side of the V. So then, the next trick, and this one is really tricky, and again, we've kept these corners on here for a reference. But it's really hard to tell. Does that look good? Yep, that looks good. That's the bottom lip that comes around the bottom of the door. Okay, so that is this piece. So we'll put these two together, and then we'll flatten this over with the bead roller. We'll put these flat rollers onto the bead roller, right, so that we're just squishing it together. So we'll leave a gap to start with so that we're not trying to pinch it down too much at the first swipe, first pass. Otherwise it might warp it a lot, or it'll ripple it. You know, metal's funny stuff. Likes to do its own thing. Okay. Yep, right direction and everything. All right. Got it rolled over here, not squished yet, but it's looking good. Tighten this down and go. Doesn't that look nice? Flattens it right out there, just like a factory job. As good as that is, compressed in there, I'm going to put a couple little tacks of weld on there so that it never slips when I take those clamps off, just as a precaution. Anybody see my gloves? Now we got a little bit of sizing to do. Wish I could put a little bit of curve in there. I think I could do that in the metal brake just by leaving the jaws loose and just give it a little, you know. Let's try that. If I was doing this for a living, I'd get a real metal brake. This one's cute. Hey, it's helpful, you know, like it does give you straight lines, and there's an awful lot you can do with it. In fact, there's probably more I could do with it if I'd get better at figuring it out. Because earlier I made this bend first, and I should have made this one first, because this one would have been easier to do later. But it's yeah, we're getting it. Now that I've put some curve in there and this little V bend here. Got this thing on the bottom. This is actually like quite stiff. It doesn't want to bend or flop the wrong way at all. This one here is not yet. It's quite loose because we just cut it right away from, you know, what it's used to. So the deal is to make this fit, and I think what I've got is a bit too much length right here. Okay, we'll have a look at the other side. See what. Oh yeah. Oh, that's pretty nice. So what we're going to do again is we're going to cut on a 45 with the zip saw straight down here, cut through the old and the new. Then they'll match up, right, with that little kind of 45-degree overlap thing. I'm thinking that looks pretty good. I mean, it's just sitting snug right in there. It's like it wants to be there. So all we have to do is trim this a bit. Again, the trick to an accurate job is to treat these corners that are later going to be cut off as though they're going to stay there. So we match this up to that corner perfectly, and we cut it off later, but then we match the new piece up to here perfectly. And perfect plus perfect equals perfect. That's going to give us a guaranteed straight. Very needed. I did that for the roof of my 29 Dodge. I actually made 1-inch square tubing hoops that went across the roof. And every one of them had a different curve in it. So I just cut a big block of wood with the sharpest curve in it, which was at the back. So I think there was 5 of them, and they got to almost no curve at the front one. So they had to gradually get straighter and straighter. Well, cut this big block of wood, I think it's 3 inches thick or whatever, and just put it in my press, held the ends down and pressed up in the middle until I got that curve. It's easier to make a curve in wood, you know, with jigsaw and some kind of a sander or planer or whatever, than it is in metal, because metal tends to curve and then all of a sudden in one spot it'll buckle, right? So we will go from the bottom, because that has to be maintained as exactly positioned, and then kind of follow the curve up. Because again, if we weld down here and up here and then try to fix the middle, not good. Always good to go one way. You want to chase the bubble, or you know, chase the curve, so that it actually works itself out as you go. Because we can adjust it up here. We'll see what kind of a gap we have or don't have once we get up there. But in the meantime, we're going to just weld it to the rusty old piece of metal. Not much chance welding to that Swiss cheese stuff. right, that's looking good. We've got this straightforward piece done now, and let's have a look at the corners, because that requires a little bit of detail. So this one was easy, of course, because it's just long and straight, right? So a little bit of bead roller, a little bit of metal brake, get the right bends on. And I must say, it's looking really good. That seam came out really nice. I'm not going to weld it solid, doesn't need to be. Ain't going to go anywhere. Besides, the upholstery will hold it together in the event of some structural failure. Well, we'll see. So the corners now, we got a lot of rust, of course, on the flat, the outer skin of the door. So we've got a lot of paper thin stuff here. When you start welding it, you can tell there's holes right here, there and there. So this is gone, this is shot, this piece here. This piece here, the corner is probably all right. Now the issue is you can't just stamp a piece like that. I mean, all the bead rolling and all this stuff, I mean, yeah, it would be really difficult. Look at this other corner. What do we got on it? It's actually in better shape. I'm just going to replace this piece here with a flat piece, get rid of that hump again. I could replace this and just leave a flap to bend up. Well, here's a few issues you might run into. The trick to welding this, of course, is to keep it cool, which we've done. And then you get to this part of the door and you've got a few boing boing things going on here all the way across the door. And you kind of think, oh no, man, I warped the door. But actually not. Inside the door, there is a stop for the window. When the window rolls down, it stops about here. And that stop has some felt or something in between it and the door. It's a flat piece, right? And it's got something in there that actually holds us out, and that's all gone out of there. So I don't know if it was some kind of rubber or whatever. So we'll replace that, and that'll actually stop that, which is different because most panels you don't have that, right? So we've got the corner ready to put the outside on. The insides are all done and they look good. And so this is basically a matter of cutting a piece like this, letting it overhang, drawing a pen mark on the back of it, and then folding it over. And to fold it over on a curve like that, we'll actually make some little cuts in it and fold it over and then tack it into place. So that's going to be real easy. This one here is a bit more intense. One of the things, because of the weld and the way we welded it here with that V thing, it's actually very strong, and it's pulled. Although this is straight as a die all the way down the door, which is really nice, it's pulled this in. And so we want to pull that up to match the edge of the door here. Now, one of the things about this door, obviously, is there's a curve going this way. And I'm putting a bigger piece in here because this was all mangled. In fact, you know, you can see it up here. It's quite rumpled. A lot of the door, a little bit of repairing to go on there. So to pull this up, what I'm going to do is cut this piece and then bend it over and put a strong back on there, like we did with the firewall, if you remember that. And so I'm going to put a lip on there, probably, I don't know, 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch, you know, a 90-degree bend that hangs down into there. There's nothing there that it'll interfere with. And then that'll hold that where it needs to be, give it that strength or that positioning that it needs. And then the same thing here. We'll just trace it on the back, probably run a bead, roller line or something on there, and then bend that and flip it over. So basically what I'll do is make the piece and have that crimp where it goes around and crimps onto here, like this piece here. I'll have that bent to say 90 degrees, welded in place, and then just tap it over, and that'll finish that off. So yeah, give me another hour here and we'll have something to show you. So this little bit of a strong back here, I'm using 20 gauge because that's what the rest of the door is. I could use something heavier, and when I bend this 90 degrees it would be a bit stronger, but because I want to use 20 gauge, what I'm going to do is bend it twice and have it doubled. That's what we got to start with. This one's right, and this one here has to fold over and go in tight. So we'll do that with a bead roller. You have to tap this over beyond 90 degrees so that the bead roller can catch it. All right, so that's looking good, but you might notice that this thing here has a curve in it going the wrong way. So we'll put the shrinker on here, and that'll actually set the curve the other way. The advantage of that, having this strong back thing here and having it curved the right way, is it's going to hold the door, the shape of the door, in the right place as we weld it. So this is going to butt up against the piece of the door, and we're going to weld it along here. Okay, shrinker. It's really close. And it's really close, it's hard to tell because the door has lost a fair amount of its proper shape. But we want to make sure that we have the right shape. A little bit hard to change it afterwards. So the finished door, there's no more bing bong oil can on there. Nice and solid and nice and straight all the way along there. It's, yeah, happy with it. Good job, well done.